Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast session. Today, we will be discussing about strategic thinking, navigating the future of business. Hi, Peggy. Good morning.
Good morning, right?
Yeah. So, Peggy, in this section, we are going to learn about strategic thinking. And here, I'm going to ask some basic questions. And there are three aspects which I'm going to discuss with you. First is, can you briefly explain what strategic thinking entails and why it is essential for leaders and organization today?
Yes. So basically, every leader has goals, and strategic thinking is necessary to make sure that you reach those goals, right? I always say, if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. But it needs a plan, right? So strategic thinking entails that you basically look what you need to do to achieve your long-term goals and how to innovate and how to basically plan resourcefully. That's the element. So how do I innovate? How do I plan resourcefully? And how do I reach my long-term goals? Meaning you have to, strategic thinking is very different to short-term thinking. So because strategic thinking means you tweak here and you're going to look at what it does it do long-term, not what it does it necessarily only do tomorrow. You do think about that too, but the long-term part is important.
Okay. Now, next question for you. What methods do you recommend for organization to evaluate their internal strength and weakness accurately? It's all about internal analysis. What method organization should follow?
I mean, basically, what are we talking about, right? Internal resources is anything which is an asset. So what do I have as a resource internally? So what assets do I have? And you have to assess the capabilities of your team. So what is the capabilities I have, and do I need to potentially recruit more capability? As an example, in today's world, a lot of companies have been too slow to recruit digital marketeers, right? Suddenly somebody woke up and said, oh, we cannot send out flyers and folders anymore, and we don't do print advertising. Now it's all about digital marketing, and some of the companies who have not planned well enough in advance, they are now in a very difficult situation because you do need to work digital marketing in today's world.
Yes, true.
That's one of the, so then you have to think about internally also, what is the processes you're using? So you have to evaluate your processes. Are we efficient? Do we have the right processes in place? That entails internal analysis as well. And I think another point is that internally you always have to reflect on what are our strengths, but also where are we weak, and where could we be vulnerable, right? So also in terms of, again, human capability, human assets, where are we vulnerable? Who are key people in the organization who we absolutely need to retain, and where is there potential danger?
Okay. Now I need to discuss about the stakeholder assessment. How leaders ensure they understand and address the needs and expectation of their key stakeholders, including customer, employees, and investor, while doing strategic thinking.
Yeah, I love that word stakeholder. It doesn't have any emotion to it, but actually that's the most, that's a key, right? So I don't like that word as such. But you just filled it with some meaning. So the first and prime stakeholder of any company is the customer, right? So let's make sure that companies focus on that, what customers need. So you need to always gather feedback. You need to understand how might the customer preference change before it happens. I think we're going to come into that. So recognizing future trends and pattern recognition is one of the parts where you have to kind of think as a company owner, do I actually still fulfill my customers' needs tomorrow, right? Not only today. Then don't forget, if you operate a company, you have employees and they have insights. So a lot of companies, they pay their human resources money, but they never ask them for the insights. And I always find that if you add the different perspectives of the different stakeholders within the company, so meaning your employees, you're totally capable of getting a very, very nice rounded picture if you add that to the picture of your customers, right? Of your customers' feedback. Last but not least, you have investors and partners. Now, investors and partners are typically outside the company, so they're not internal, they're outside of the company. They can give you very good feedback, which I call a 360 feedback. So they could basically educate you on what's going on out there, especially investors who are typically invested not only in your company, but in multiple ventures. You can get a very nice input from other industry, for example.
Okay, got it. And apart from this 360 tool, which you mentioned right now, is there any technique or tools you can suggest to organizations or you have used in your overall career? I mean, where these tools anticipate the future trends and how they could affect the industry. I mean, whatever industry.
Yes, I mean, typically what you would do is you do a trend analysis, right? So but you can also do a historical data review. So you could see how did my portfolio evolve? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses in the portfolio? It will give you a lot of indication. Okay. And you really, basically, if you scan that, you can see a lot of trends already out of your own historical data. But as everything, you also have to look at the current indicators. So what is the economy doing out there, right? So if you have a super premium product and you're going through a time like this, where money is tight, inflation is high, and people are going through crisis, you might need to adapt, right? You might need to innovate in another segment. So that's something you have to look into. So you cannot ignore current economics, current indicators. And then the last but not least, what I like, what is a bit tricky, is pattern recognition. Typically what you find is things repeat themselves after a while. So is there a certain pattern to the customer behavior? Is there a certain pattern to employee behavior, right? So these are the trend analysis tools I suggest to really figure out, again, you know, not only historical data, not only current indicators, not only pattern, just do all three of them and you get a better picture of what's going on.
Okay. Now, the most important question, that's crafting long-term plans for a business. Yes. So when setting a long-term strategic goal, how can organization balance the need for ambitious vision that goes with the realistic and achievable milestone? With strategic thinking, what's the long-term strategic plan that an organization should follow that balance the need? I mean, the need should balance the customer and the business. It should have a realistic achievement.
I mean, that's it's a bit like a crystal ball, right? It's a bit like a crystal ball. So do we really know the long-term needs? No. Right? And we shouldn't go through the illusion we know. What we can do, though, is we can build scenarios, right? So what you can do is you do a scenario planning. You identify and determine the key factors you need to evaluate. And then basically you do, you create a scenario which goes out in the future. Okay. And not only one, right? You build 2 or 3 scenarios. And from there, you kind of plan how you would act, right? Or what you need to do, scenario A, B, or C. Do not only create 2 scenarios, because I always find two options are not options, they're a dilemma, right? Because it's either or. So I always suggest to go with an uneven number, typically minimum 3, right? Yes. And I think you have to analyze the implications. Now, watch out. I mean, we're talking a lot of analysis, and I love this American word which says analysis paralysis. So I see a lot of companies who do massive, iterations on typically long-term scenarios. That's not necessary. What you need to do is you need to kind of get your mindset there. What could happen long-term? You have to chunk it down to the essentials, but do not go overboard with analyzing something that hasn't even happened. Much more important it is to say, what do I do? Should A, B, or C happen? Okay. And the last question for you, it is all about enhancing organization resilience. What strategies can organization adopt to build resilience and prepare for the potential disruptions or crisis that is
coming, like maybe there might be any crisis which is coming in near future, what strategies can?
Yes, you don't necessarily need a crisis, right? What you need is a risk management assessment, and that needs to be continuous. So any company has certain risks. I mentioned one. I mentioned one before, which is the human resource factor, which I still think one of the key parts in this whole scenario, because if you lose not one but maybe two of your key people, you're going to have a problem, right?
Yes.
So I think it is very, very important to think about contingency. It is very important to build not only the first level, but also the second level employee structure in order to ensure that the know-how is spread as widely as it can be within the organization. And typically that if you take one part out, that not everything collapses. So, and it's not necessarily a crisis. It's already managing adversity, right? Something, a short thunderstorm comes, you need to make sure that it doesn't throw anybody off, right? And you don't lose anybody in the big ocean out there. So again, here scenario building helps. Risk analysis helps. And I think also talking to people about potential adversity, right? What would we do in a case of X, Y, and Z? Like pre-discuss it beforehand and collect the input you get from the outside world on that too.
And Peggy, before winding up the session, one last message for our audience. Any one last message for the audience?
Yeah,
you want to share?
My last message is always believe in magic, right? So you can be a perfect strategic thinker. I mean, never stop thinking, right? But also never stop believing that magic happens even in the darkest of times. There's always opportunity out there. If you're a good strategic thinker and if you apply what we just spoke about and you really look and listen what's going on in your company, you will always be able to find opportunity anywhere. So that's the message I would like to give.
It was a nice session with you, Peggy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have a nice day.